Coming May 30th, 2026 to Nashville, Michigan. It's Ghostorama Nashville. Coming to you from the Foxview Event Center in Nashville, located at 975 Main Street. We will have spooky vendors, a car show, food vendors, activities for the little hunters in our lives. This is a look at para-unity at its best. Skeptics, believers, non-believers, debunkers, the general public. It is a deep dive into the supernatural and the paranormal. We will have 3 public speaking engagements at noon, 1 and 2. Vendor spaces are limited indoors at $35 and outdoors unlimited at $25. The show will be followed by an after-hours ghost hunt at one of Nashville's top hunting locations. The price for the after-hours ghost hunt is $30 for the first person in your team and $20 for each additional team member. Come and join us May 30th, 2026 for Ghostorama. Or always wonder what truly hides in the dark. Ghostorama is sponsored by Southern Michigan Paranormal's Frankenfest, Paranormal Pulp Investigations, Jesse Joan of Arc, and the Midwest Parahistoric Society.
Hey kids, it's Papa with Paranormal Papa Investigations. You know, I wanted to give the ghosties a little bit of break. I didn't know they had a union, but they're demanding, a little bit of break for this week. So I decided that we were going to look into another spectrum of the paranormal, cryptids. But not just any cryptids. Living here in Michigan, beginning of March, once again, this winter has been no different than any other winter for the last half a century. There have been reports to newspapers, to law enforcement, all over the South Central, all the way up to the top of the UP about dogman sightings. People hearing it at night, people seeing things along the road, people seeing things watching their homes. And I thought, where did these stories come from? What is the origin of the Wolfman, the werewolf, the dogman? I found information going clear back 350, 400 years in France. And it was no legend then. It was their reality. check this out. This is good.
The villagers said the man they found was barely recognizable. Torn limbs, scattered bones, no animal tracks. For centuries, we were told that werewolves were real only in stories, that they belonged to legend, to nightmares, to whispers beneath the moonlight. But what if that wasn't the whole truth? What if some of the most horrifying chapters in European history were not tales, but testimonies? Tonight, we peel back the skin of myth to reveal something older, darker, and far more human. This is not just the story of werewolf mythology. It's the story of how societies projected their deepest fears onto the bodies of men. Men who were hunted, punished, and erased. From ancient werewolf stories to the scorched trial records of medieval Europe, we confront the question that haunted entire villages. What if the beast lived next door? Tonight, we will descend into the illusion. Let us begin. Voices of the Wolf. The year is 1603 in Franche-Comté, France. A 14-year-old boy named Jean Grenier stands before the court and calmly confesses to hunting as a wolf. He claims a dark figure gave him a salve, a magical ointment that let him transform. The judges believe him. We will return to his story later in the video. French werewolf cases like Grenier's were not isolated. Between the 15th and 17th centuries, Europe witnessed hundreds of real werewolf trials, particularly in areas where the church was battling pagan beliefs. As documented in the work of historian Charlotte F. Otten, these cases often emerged in the same regions and even before the same judges as the infamous witch trials. Werewolves and witches were treated as kin. In many rulings, they were punished together. But here's the twist. Some of those accused truly believed they had transformed, not metaphorically, literally. Scholars analyzing this period highlight that the merging of religious fear, isolation, and inherited trauma could create a psychological break so deep it birthed a new identity, one that howled, one that devoured, one that needed to be punished. These were not always criminals. Sometimes they were scapegoats caught in the machinery of forbidden tradition, or victims of a belief system that turned internal suffering into external monstrosity. Why did so many believe? Why were wolves so central to Europe's fearscape? And why did the line between man and monster blur so easily in those centuries? Because wolves didn't just threaten livestock. They threatened the illusion of civilization itself. Next, we'll follow the trail of blood into the woods of Poligny, where a man swore that beneath his skin, the beast was always waiting. The trial where the beast confessed. They say he walked into the courtroom barefoot, shackled, silent, his eyes fixed not on the judge, but on something behind him, something only he could see. The case of Gilles Garnier in 1573 was not supposed to shake the region of Dole, France. It began as a hunt for a predator, killing children near the woods. What authorities found instead was a man who claimed he had fed on flesh, not out of hunger, but compulsion. Garnier believed he was cursed to become a beast, and the court believed him too. This wasn't a fairy tale. This was a legal proceeding, one that ended in fire. The real werewolf trials of early modern Europe were not isolated events. They were systemic responses to fear, of wolves, of wilderness, of outsiders. And Garnier's trial was one of the most chilling. According to primary documents preserved from the Parlement of Dole, Garnier confessed under questioning to using an oil that let him transform into a wolf. He described the feeling of his limbs stretching, his senses sharpening, his mind slipping. This wasn't insanity, the court ruled. This was heresy, a pact with darkness, a threat to the moral and social order. Historian Willem de Blécourt, writing extensively on werewolves in medieval Europe, argues that these cases represented a ritualized punishment of those who broke not only law, but cosmology, those who violated the Christian separation between man and beast. In the minds of 16th century judges, real werewolves didn't need fangs to be dangerous. Their crime was collapsing the hierarchy between the natural and the monstrous. But Garnier was not alone. In just a few decades, dozens across France, Switzerland, and Germany faced similar fates. Some were old, many were children, some confessed, others did not survive long enough to speak. In all of them, society projected a growing anxiety. What if the beast wasn't beyond the woods, but within the village walls? This fear wasn't just religious, it was political. As forbidden folklore clashed with emerging legal systems, wolves became the perfect symbol of deviance, a creature at once familiar and alien. To be feared, yes, but also used. By courts, by priests, by rulers who needed enemies to unify a frightened populace. Why was the wolf chosen as the icon of transformation? What did it represent that a snake or raven could not? And why did so many of these trials focus on the poor, the wandering, the mentally fragile? Because they were easy to isolate, easy to fear, easy to burn. In the next chapter, we turn to an even stranger case, where the accused wasn't sentenced to death, but locked away for life. And every night, they say, he howled in his sleep. When stories like this one linger in your mind, it's because they touch something ancient in all of us. The part that wonders what hides behind civilization's mask. If you felt that shiver, if you want to keep exploring the shadows of forgotten history, like this video, share it with a friend who'd understand, and subscribe to our channel. It matters more than you think. Now let's go back to the video. boy who believed he was a wolf. He was found crouched in a churchyard, tearing at raw meat with his teeth. When questioned, he said the moon had called him. He didn't ask for the curse. It had been given. Let's go back to Jean Grenier. He was only 13 when he was arrested in 1603 in the Bordeaux region of France. But his confession stunned the court and has haunted historians ever since. Unlike most real werewolf trials, his case did not end in fire. It ended in an asylum. And what happened there raises a disturbing question. What if some truly believed they were wolves? Jean claimed he was initiated into a secret brotherhood. A man dressed in black gave him a salve. After applying it, he said, his body would stretch, twist, transform. He would run on all fours, hunt children, feed on them. And when he awoke, he remembered it all. Not as dream, but memory. Historical records studied by Henri Boguet, a magistrate who personally investigated werewolf cases, indicate that Jean's testimony was given with striking calm. He offered specific names, places, and details that matched recent disappearances. But what alarmed the court even more was his lack of remorse. Jean didn't weep. He grinned. Scholars like Marion Gibson suggest that Jean's case may reflect early understandings of mental illness, specifically lycanthropic delusion. In periods of social breakdown and religious terror, the self can fracture in mythic terms. To believe oneself to be a wolf wasn't necessarily evil. It was a way to make sense of uncontrollable urges, traumas, or desires. But in the eyes of the church, Jean was still a threat, and so he was confined for the rest of his life. Werewolf mythology had blurred with medicine, theology, and law, and in that murky space, the line between punishment and protection dissolved. Jean was not burned like Garnier, but his life was erased just the same. This case opens up a deeper layer in the history of werewolves throughout history. That belief in the beast wasn't always external. Sometimes it came from within, and that internalization of the myth may be the most disturbing legacy of all. Why did boys like Jean confess so vividly? Why did they seem to want the curse? And how much of their guilt was shaped not by what they did, but by what society told them they were? If you've ever wondered how much a myth can shape a mind, this is where the story shifts. In the next chapter, we enter the forgotten forests of Gévaudan, where a monstrous figure tore through the countryside. Hundreds died, and to this day, no one can say for certain whether it was an animal or something wearing a human face. The beast that devoured Gévaudan. They called it a wolf, but no one had ever seen a creature like it. It walked on all fours until it didn't. It tore throats with surgical precision. It hunted in daylight, and it never touched livestock, only people. Between 1764 and 1767, the French province of Gévaudan descended into panic. More than 100 men, women, and children were killed by what came to be known as La Bête du Gévaudan, the Beast of Gévaudan. Some said it was a monstrous wolf, others a man in disguise. Some whispered of forbidden tradition, of dark rituals in the woods. But one truth endured. Whatever it was, it changed the way a nation saw itself. As documented in royal archives and military reports, entire regiments were dispatched to hunt the beast. Rewards were offered, villages took up arms, and still the killings continued. Victims were found mutilated, often decapitated. Witnesses described a creature far larger than a wolf, with reddish fur and uncanny intelligence. It evaded traps. It stalked its victims. It seemed to enjoy the hunt. Historian J.M. Smith, writing in Monsters of the Gévaudan, argues that the beast was never just an animal. It was a symbol, a projection. As France reeled from political unrest and religious tension, the creature gave shape to the nation's fear. It was the unknown made flesh. And in a time when vampires, werewolves, and witches haunted the public imagination, the line between natural predator and cursed to become a beast blurred entirely. Some believed the beast was a serial killer. Others said it was a trained animal used by a nobleman for sport. A few swore they saw it shift shape. But the killings were real, and the panic they inspired was so deep that it reached the court of Louis XV himself. Eventually, a large wolf was killed and presented as the culprit, but the attacks continued for months afterward, fueling speculation that the true killer had not been caught at all. Werewolves in medieval Europe had often been portrayed as lone, isolated figures, but the Beast of Gévaudan was something more, a national obsession, a myth reborn in modern clothes, a reminder that even in an age of muskets and newspapers, forbidden folklore could still overpower reason. What made the people of Gévaudan so quick to believe it was no ordinary wolf? What ancient fears stirred beneath the surface? And why, even after the killings stopped, did the story continue to grow, passed down, rewritten, transformed? Because some legends do not die. They adapt, and they return. In the next chapter, we step into the present, where stories of real werewolf sightings still emerge. From the forests of Eastern Europe to the highways of America, something strange still walks among us. But this time, the monsters may have learned to blend in. When the howl never ended. It always starts the same way. A blurry photo. A frantic call to police. An animal too big, too fast, too silent to be a wolf. And the witness swears it had human eyes. Centuries after the last real werewolf trials, the myth should be gone. And yet, reports of real werewolf sightings keep surfacing, not just in Europe, but across the globe. In 1992, two motorists in Bray Road, Wisconsin, claimed a creature with a wolf's snout and human hands chased their car. In Romania, hikers whisper of encounters with upright beasts in the Carpathians. And in remote Russian towns, the folklore of the werewolves throughout history still echoes through winter nights. These aren't fairy tales. They're modern testimonies, spoken with the same terror and conviction as those who lived during the werewolf mythology of the 16th century. As noted by folklorist Linda S. Godfrey, who documented dozens of these cases, many witnesses described the same thing: a large, bipedal figure, wolf-like, but not fully animal. The consistency is unsettling, and it begs the question: are these cultural artifacts, psychological projections, or something else entirely? In the age of satellites and surveillance, belief in shapeshifters should have vanished, but it hasn't. Instead, it has evolved. On internet forums, in fringe communities, even in modern subcultures, the idea of transformation, of becoming something more primal, more powerful, still grips the human psyche. Some claim it's symbolic, a rejection of societal norms. Others believe it reflects ancient trauma passed through generations, a legacy of fear and isolation embedded so deeply it re-emerges as hallucination or as identity. Scholars like Jeffrey Victor suggest that these beliefs thrive in marginalized spaces, where people feel forgotten, hunted, or powerless. In that sense, werewolves were real, not because of fur or fangs, but because of what they represented: rage, repression, survival. And then there's the darker angle. Forbidden folklore has always found a way to adapt. The monster changes shape to fit the age. In the past, it was a cursed villager. Today, it might be a killer whose mind breaks in the shape of myth. The wolf has become a vessel, a mask. So perhaps the question is not whether real werewolves still exist, but what parts of ourselves we're still willing to label as inhuman. If the villagers of Poligny feared the woods, we now fear what lurks behind the screen. If Garnier blamed a curse, today's monsters blame voices, algorithms, ancestral blood. The myth lives on because the human need to make sense of horror has never disappeared. What if the werewolf was never about wolves at all? What if the real transformation was within us? In the final chapter, we return to the core of the legend, where vampires, werewolves, and witches merged into one terrifying fear, and where, even today, the lines between belief and history remain dangerously thin. The witch, the wolf, and the war on the human soul. They burned the witches, they hunted the wolves. But in the darkest corners of European history, the two were never separate. In the late 16th century, inquisitors across Germany, France, and Switzerland began noticing a strange pattern. Accused witches would confess not just to curses and potions, but to running with wolves, changing shape, drinking blood. And likewise, those accused in real werewolf trials often spoke of spells, familiars, and flying at night. These weren't two superstitions. They were one fear with many faces. As documented in the Nuremberg trial records of 1595, a man named Hans was charged not as a witch or a werewolf, but both. He confessed under pressure that a woman had given him a salve, and that together they would roam the woods, half human, half beast. The court accepted this as proof of diabolical collaboration. His punishment was swift. From the perspective of historian Wolfgang Behringer, this blending of identities was not confusion, it was design. The church saw no need to distinguish between werewolves and witches. Both represented the same threat: transformation beyond God's order. They were shapeshifters in body and belief. Heretics who turned into animals and tore at the social fabric. Vampires, werewolves, and witches were the unholy trinity of pre-modern Europe, being said to violate not just the flesh, but the soul. Their punishment was symbolic, to erase what they represented. And what they represented was rebellion, female independence, male rage, sexual freedom, madness, poverty, difference. As argued by historian Lyndall Roper, the witch wolf was not just a myth, it was a metaphor weaponized, a way to explain the unexplainable: epidemics, starvation, child death, and the punishments handed down were meant not just to cleanse, but to warn. But here's where the illusion cracks. Despite centuries of suppression, these stories survived in oral traditions, in nightmares, in whispered warnings to children. The church failed to kill the myth. It only made it darker. And today, we live with the remnants. Forbidden folklore still shapes horror films, conspiracy theories, even fringe religious movements. The werewolf, like the witch, still haunts the edges of identity, symbolizing what society rejects, fears, or tries to bury. So we end where we began, with a howl in the dark, a flicker of movement just beyond the tree line, a question that won't die. Werewolves were real, or are we still becoming them? As the last echoes of the werewolf's howl fade, another darkness stirs. For centuries, one creature has walked beside the wolf in myth, the one that doesn't howl but whispers, the one that doesn't hunt in packs, but waits alone in the shadows. If the werewolf was born from fear of the wilderness, the vampire was born from fear of ourselves, of desire, decay, and the price of immortality. The story continues where the moonlight ends. Step with me into the next night, where blood replaces breath and the dead refuse to sleep. Watch our next journey. Good night.
Welcome back. You know, it's like I was saying at the beginning, being here in Michigan, even within a 50 or 75 mile range of where I'm at, clear down by the Indiana line, we get reports to local law enforcement every year about people hearing the dog man, seeing him, seeing things reflecting from the woods line, from their porch lights, being out back feeding their animals and hearing something big walking through the woods. And it got me wondering about the origins of the stories, the origins of the legends of the werewolf, the wolfman, the dog man. And as I started delving deeper into these stories, I come to find out that for the people of France during the 1600s, 1700s, they weren't just legends. It was their everyday fear and their everyday reality. What is the truth behind these reported individuals? When it's an adult, it's easy to contribute it to just being a psychopath, a serial killer, a cannibal. But what about when it's a child? They always say that some of the first steps to becoming that psychopath or that serial killer is the abuse and mistreatment of small animals. But what about a boy being found in a churchyard eating raw flesh? There's more than one report. There were countless reports of children who were plagued by this curse. Throughout France, England, Romania, kind of makes you wonder. They say that every myth, every legend, every piece of folklore is steeped in fact. So what is the truth behind these werewolf sightings and these trials in France or in the other countries? Were they real? Were they just overactive imaginations and fears? Or was it something even more sinister? That's all we got for you today. I hope you enjoyed this look into wolves. Until next time, take care of yourselves, take care of each other. God bless you, God love you, we do. And happy hunting.